In 2020, the Palisades Fire scorched nearly 1,200 acres near Malibu Canyon. Thousands of homes were damaged, but many in Malibu managed to stay standing, including the $80 million mansion that belongs to a man who has built his empire through real estate, Grant Cardone. Grant's house is perched right over the Pacific, and like I said, it wasn't burned to the ground, but like many impacted homes in the area, smoke crept inside as the surrounding fires burned, which did a lot of damage to the interior finishes and structure. Most people who end up in a situation like this with smoke damage, they'll do one of two things. One, they'll just fix the smoke damage on their own if it's not all that bad, or two, they'll file a claim with their insurance company and have all the damage repaired and fixed and paid through that process. But how this unfolded for Grant and how things are unfolding for a bunch of other homeowners in the area who are impacted by these fires has become much more complicated than just cleaning up some smoke damage. Grant has taken to social media to share with his followers that FEMA is not allowing him to repair his Malibu home. They are saying that the only way to make his home livable again is to demolish it entirely and rebuild it.
Cardone's beachside house in Malibu survived the Palisades Fire, but FEMA rules may force him to tear it down anyways.
This is a perfect structure. They want me to take all that down.
Grant Cardone has been very outspoken with his feelings about government in California the last couple years, so of course he's pushing back on FEMA, saying that this is the biggest overreach he's ever seen. Today, let's talk about what's really happening in Malibu and whether or not Grant Cardone and all of his neighbors are really going to need to tear their houses down over a little bit of smoke damage. Now, I'm gonna guess that most of you guys watching this video have heard of Grant Cardone. He's not just like a casual, longtime Malibu homeowner. He is one of the most recognizable figures in the real estate industry. Grant is a real estate mogul, an educator, an influencer, and a motivational speaker. And over the last decade or so, he has built an empire called Cardone Capital that has grown to billions of dollars worth of real estate under management. I've been watching Grant on and off for years now, and whether you love him or hate him, there's no doubt that this dude is a very savvy businessman, and even more than that, a master of marketing. Grant knows how to make noise. He has over 5 million followers just on Instagram alone, and so yeah, when he starts saying that FEMA is forcing him to demolish his multi-million-dollar Malibu home, it basically immediately becomes national news. His claim was this, that his fire-damaged house that was just smoke damaged, it was not destroyed, was now being forced to be demolished, but not for a reason that had anything to do with the fires, but instead because of a flood regulation.
I will be required to take my property down to the ground, to raise the house to what they call as a new FEMA flood level. And I've never been threatened by water, never had a flood.
It is honestly hard to believe that this is actually a FEMA requirement, but the key to understanding this part of the story lies in one phrase, which is the substantial damage rule. Under FEMA's National Flood Insurance Program, any home in a designated flood zone that incurs substantial damage must be brought up to modern building standards if the owner wants to fix those damages, which in some cases, like in the case of Grant's home, modern building standards means that Grant needs a new foundation. They're arguing that the base elevation of his house isn't high enough above the FEMA required base elevation of a house in this area. How FEMA determines the definition of substantial damage is if the cost to repair the home is more than 50% of the assessed value of the structure, then the entire structure is considered substantially damaged. And once that happens, the homeowner isn't allowed to just remodel the house or repair it on their own. They're required by federal regulation to either remodel the building or rebuild it entirely to meet current day code. It's hard to even understand what FEMA's intentions are with this rule. Like, I guess on the surface, they're trying to just keep communities safe and not put people in situations where they're rebuilding homes that are vulnerable to flood damage at some point down the road. Because if a flood is a real threat, then it's more than just these multi-million-dollar homes that would be at risk. People's lives could be at risk too, and FEMA obviously doesn't want that blood on their hands. But like any hard rule that doesn't look at each situation individually, the results of regulations like this can be pretty ridiculous, and that's exactly what's happening here with Grant Cardone's mansion and with a lot of his neighbors. neighbors. A house in Malibu that has never flooded could still be in a floodplain on a FEMA map, and Cardone's property does appear to sit within a mapped flood zone, which makes sense, I guess, seeing that it's literally right on the water. So what has happened here is Grant got really bad smoke damage to his house after the fire. They did an assessment and determined that the cost to repair that smoke damage is greater than 50% of the assessed value of his home that we were just talking about, meaning that when he does do all the repairs, he has to bring the home up to modern standards. And that's the problem. You can't bring Grant's house up to modern FEMA standards without completely demolishing it. Just to get a feel for the house that we're talking about today, here's the old Zillow listing for Grant's house. It's a 6-bedroom house, 10 baths, 9,500 square feet. This place was built in 2005, so it's not even all that old. It has got 150 feet of beach frontage here, which is a lot of beach frontage no matter where you are, but it's especially a lot for Malibu. Inside, the finishes are nice. They're not exactly my style, but there's definitely some high-end expensive finishes throughout this house. Right off your deck, you're like 15 steps from the ocean. But this picture right here gives us a good visual on what FEMA is saying is the problem here. So this line, basically at the top of the caissons, the bottom of the base floor, they're saying that this part of the house is too close to the water. Believe it or not, they're saying that it's only off by 1 foot. That's it. It's just 1 foot too close to the water. But in reality, it doesn't matter if it's off by 1 foot or 1 inch. Since Grant is trying to do these renovations to his house that exceed 50% of the value of his house, remember, renovations that he has to do because of the smoke damage, then FEMA says he needs to bring that base floor elevation up by 1 foot regardless. You're not gonna just raise this entire house and swimming pool and everything up by 1 foot. There's not really any way to do that. If you have to do that, you're gonna need to tear the whole thing down, pour new caissons, and rebuild the entire house. Enez did a tour of this home with Grant. This was filmed before the fire damage, but this video gives a great sense of the property. It's a perfectly good house. Like I said earlier, super high-end finishes and furniture throughout. We're talking about a house that at the time of the filming of this video was claimed to be worth around $80 million. Grant's estimating that the cost to repair the fire damage would only be around $2 million, but if he does end up needing to tear the whole house down, with the cost of new construction in Malibu, we're talking about at least a $20 million expense to rebuild. As expected, Grant has been super vocal about this entire situation, speaking out on all of his platforms. On Twitter, he called out to President Trump and Secretary Kristi Noem, saying that homeowners in the state of California desperately need attention. He said that while his Malibu home was saved by firemen and God, it may not survive the overreach of FEMA, with the organization being weaponized by the state to prevent homeowners from repairing their homes. What's interesting too is that Grant's efforts here aren't selfish. Like, he's not just focused on himself. He's also very concerned about the impact that all of this is going to have on his neighbors.
Patrick Miller's home in Malibu also has smoke damage, somewhere he's lived his entire life.
This may be the situation that we're going to lose that community.
And you have to be super rich now in California to survive this. The middle class rich are being impacted like they're poor people now.
There were dozens, if not hundreds, of homes in Malibu that were impacted by the fires in the exact same way. They got really bad smoke damage, but they didn't completely burn down. And most of these homes are much more modest than Grant's, at least for Malibu standards. We're talking homes worth maybe $5 to $10 million, homes that have been owned for decades or even for generations. Grant understands that somebody like himself, who's got a net worth of at least $500 million, can absorb a loss like this. Like, if he does need to tear down his house, that won't completely financially break him. But what about all the other families or retired people along the coast who aren't ultra high net worth people with massive incomes? Many of these locals literally might not be able to afford to rebuild if FEMA does require that. Let's just say hypothetically for a second that FEMA does win this battle and they basically condemn Grant Cardone's house along with all of his neighbors who faced fire damage and weren't in compliance. And let's also assume for a second that all of these homeowners do have the money to rebuild and they just comply. So they're like, okay, whatever, we'll go ahead, we'll tear our houses down, we'll rebuild. Well, this is where things get even more messed up because the thing is, Malibu is known to have some of the strictest local permitting systems in the country, especially with houses that are built in this region that need to be routed through the Coastal Commission. So if FEMA says that your house needs to be demolished and rebuilt, now you need to go through the entire design, engineering, and permitting process for building a new house on your lot. You're looking at years before you're even going to be granted approval from the city to start the project of building your new house, and it'll be a couple more years worth of construction, maybe more. So even if you can afford to comply, we're talking 5 years out minimum before you're even able to move into your new house. Your new house, by the way, which is probably very, very similar to your old house, with the biggest difference being that your new house sits about a foot above the water higher than your old one. At this point, as far as I could find, FEMA hasn't commented on Grant Cardone's specific case, and they probably won't. They're not exactly the type to engage in public disputes, but knowing Grant Cardone, he is not going to go quiet. He is not going to let this rest. Whether he wins this battle or not is yet to be seen, but I'd say that this is just another example of California regulation getting in the way of common sense. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments, and I'll see you next time.